The room was warm with candlelight and quiet murmurs of prayer, the scent of lavender oil faint beneath the sharper tang of brewed coffee from the church hall. Joanne sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes closed, head lowered, but ears fully alert. It was her daughter's voice that pierced through the circle of women and unspooled the illusion of peace. "I just want freedom to live my faith without constant guilt," Candace said softly, too softly, like someone whispering secrets in God's ear. "My mother means well. She just holds too tight. It can feel possessive." Joanne's eyelids didn't flutter. Her spine stayed straight, but something inside her cracked clean in two. The circle hummed with gentle affirmations. A few women nodded with closed eyes. A few murmured, the kind people give when they're agreeing but don't want to admit it out loud. Joanne heard it all. She didn't lift her head. She didn't speak. But the heat in her cheeks told her she'd been heard in all the wrong ways. Candace's voice, sugared and tremulous, floated on. "It's hard, trying to honor someone who still wants to control you. But I know the Lord sees my heart." By the time the circle ended, Joanne had forgotten what they'd been praying about. As the women stood and exchanged hugs, none of them made eye contact with her for long. There were polite smiles, brittle and brief, like passing pleasantries at a funeral. Even Janine, the one she had driven to every doctor's appointment last year, only gave her a quick pat on the shoulder before drifting toward Candace, who was now receiving hugs like a martyr. Joanne quietly gathered her things. She didn't speak, didn't ask questions. She just smiled once, tightly, and walked out into the cool, dusk air. The wind caught the edge of her scarf, whipping it like a flag of retreat. That night, she didn't cry. She watered her peace lilies, wiped down her countertops, and reheated the soup she'd made that morning. Her kitchen smelled of thyme and garlic, familiar, comforting, but nothing settled in her chest. She opened the worn photo album on her kitchen table. There was Candace in her kindergarten angel wings, dressed for the Christmas pageant Joanne sewed by hand. Another one, her high school graduation, then college, then the counseling certificate from a faith-based program Joanne helped fund after pulling from her own retirement account. All those years, Joanne cheering, carrying, covering, and now, possessive. In the stillness of her bedroom, Joanne knelt beside her bed like she had every night for decades. But tonight, the prayer was different. "God," she whispered, "I'm not asking for mercy tonight. I'm asking for clarity. Show me what I'm really seeing." Outside her window, the wind rustled the trees. Something about it felt colder than usual. She thought about the last few months. The gradual way Candace had begun to reshape her place in the church, first as a helper, then a faith-based counselor, and now, a voice of authority. At first, Joanne had been proud. Candace had charm, sure, but she also had conviction. That's what Joanne told herself. But lately there were signs. Meetings that Joanne wasn't invited to, emails Candace was copied on instead, sermons where Pastor Eli quoted, "a dear young woman of great discernment," followed by language lifted word for word from Candace's Instagram captions, and then last week a photo on the church website, Candace standing beside Pastor Eli, both smiling, with the caption, "Exploring New Leadership Pathways." Joanne remembered the way Candace had started calling him Eli instead of Pastor when they spoke in the hallway, the way he listened to her like her words were prophecy and not branding. She couldn't prove anything, but Joanne knew people, and something was shifting beneath the surface. This wasn't just about a prayer circle. This was about influence, power, and someone positioning herself to inherit both. The next morning, she finds out she's been removed from the retreat planning committee, with no explanation. Joanne drew a firm circle around the words on her notepad, possessive and controlling, then underlined the time, 7:08 p.m., like a caseworker logging evidence. The ink was barely dry when her phone buzzed again on the kitchen table. A message preview flashed from Beverly, the church board secretary. "Hey, Joanne, wanted to loop you in gently. We had a few quiet concerns raised. Maybe it's a good time for a leadership break? Self-care is holy, too." Joanne didn't respond. She didn't need to. The message said everything. This wasn't concern. This was dismissal wrapped in embroidery floss. She placed the notepad beside her half-drunk tea and let the silence around her stretch like a decision being made. The next morning, Joanne stepped into the church vestibule with practiced calm and a stack of donation forms. The hall still smelled like lemon wood polish and those same cinnamon wax warmers they used year-round. From the office, she spotted Pam, another longtime board member, sorting flyers behind the folding table. Joanne approached with measured steps. "Quick question," she said casually. "Did something shift on the retreat planning schedule? I didn't see my name listed anywhere." Pam looked up too quickly. "Oh, well, there's been some reassigning. Nothing personal, just rotation." Joanne narrowed her eyes slightly. "Rotation or removal?" Pam hesitated. "Candace mentioned you've seemed under a lot of pressure lately. Maybe even emotional?" Joanne tilted her head. "So the board heard from my daughter before they heard from me." Pam gave a rehearsed smile. "She's just worried about you." Worried, as if concern was a form of permission to erase someone's work. Joanne gave a nod, not of agreement but acknowledgement, and walked out without another word. By the time she got home, her living room felt smaller somehow, tighter around the edges. She sat at her desk, pulled open the drawer labeled Church, Ministry 2009 to Present, and began building a timeline: emails, planning documents, board votes. 14 years of labor laid out like a ledger of loyalty. Bake sales, shelter nights, grief counseling rosters. She clicked into the women's group Facebook page. Something felt off. Posts missing. Her event recaps gone. The digital wall she'd helped build was now whitewashed, but Candace's posts were still there, shiny, curated, vaguely inspirational, Bible verses, coffee selfies captioned, renewed and boundaried. And one from last Thursday: "The hardest part of healing is keeping your peace around people who made you sick." Joanne didn't flinch. She screenshotted. That weekend, while helping her friend Marla update a scheduling glitch in the new church app, a sidebar popped open, auto-synced with congregant public activity. Marla chuckled. Didn't even know this pulled in Venmo. Weird feature. But Joanne was already staring. Candace's public Venmo feed loaded on the screen like a confession dressed in emojis. Brunch, club cover, and one labeled Emergency Uber. On the same date she'd claimed to be fasting in spiritual solitude. Joanne's hand went still on the mouse. This wasn't about wine or brunch or emojis. This was about the growing gap between Candace's curated image and the truth Joanne had always protected, even when it stung. Then another transaction scrolled into view. $150 at the guy from Grindr. Joanne's mouth parted slightly. She didn't gasp. She didn't speak. She simply reached for her phone, took a screenshot, and opened a new folder on her desktop. Candace, public ledger subfolder, inconsistencies. She looked at Marla, voice even. "Do you know if this app syncs deleted history too?" Joanne didn't wait for Marla's answer. Her fingers moved with a steadiness that surprised even her, screenshotting every visible line on Candace's public Venmo activity as if they were legal exhibits. Because in her gut, she already knew. They would be. Brunch, club cover, emergency Uber, a transaction labeled Thirst Trap Fund, tagged with a row of kiss face emojis. Joanne's eyes scanned them without flinching, her breath held as if each tap of the screen exhaled a deeper betrayal. It wasn't the nightlife. She didn't care that Candace had friends, had fun. What caught in Joanne's throat was something more corrosive: the hypocrisy. Just last week, Candace had sighed dramatically during a church finance meeting, her voice dripping with piety. "I wish I could give more, I really do. But things are tight right now. God is teaching me stewardship." Stewardship? Joanne thought bitterly, clicking through more transactions. These weren't the digital fingerprints of a woman under spiritual pressure. They were the curated chaos of someone living two lives, one sanctified in the sanctuary, the other broadcast in emoji-laced fragments. Joanne opened her notebook and began cross-referencing. Date by date, entry by entry. March 14th, board meeting, Candace claimed rent issues. March 14th, Venmo, date night, $120 to @JulianBay. April 3rd, board email, can't contribute to women's retreat this year. April 3rd, Venmo, nails plus lashes plus brunch, $90. She didn't need to editorialize. The receipts spoke louder than any accusation ever could. Each ding of her phone as she screenshotted felt like punctuation, not rage, evidence. She paused on a familiar name. Janine Hope, $75, labeled Heart Healing Tools. Joanne blinked. Janine was in their prayer circle, the same Janine who hadn't looked her in the eye since that awkward hug. Joanne clicked deeper. More names, more labels. Alignment work, confidence mapping, feminine flow reboot. Candace was charging their church friends for pop psychology spiritual coaching and branding it as ministry. Joanne leaned back, the edges of her vision going a little soft. A memory rushed in. Candace on the couch 2 years ago, curled under a blanket, sobbing after her breakup with Derek. Joanne had brought her tea and rubbed her back while she wept, whispering, "You are not alone, baby. You never have to build something by pretending. So much for that." The candle on Joanne's desk flickered as if reacting to the shift in the air. She clicked to refresh, just to be sure nothing else had slipped in unnoticed. And then it appeared. Last Saturday, $150 to the guy from Grindr for the vibe. Her stomach dropped, not from judgment, but from the brutal contrast. This was the same weekend Candace had stood in front of the congregation, dressed in blush tones and mascara tears, requesting special prayer to navigate a new spiritual season. Joanne stood slowly, unsure whether she needed air or just less clarity. She walked to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and set it to boil. The hiss of water helped calm the blood in her ears. Across the room, her Bible lay open where she'd left it, next to her journal and the list of women to pray for this month. Candace's name sat right at the top. She crossed it out. Back at her laptop, she opened a blank folder and labeled it Candace/financial patterns. Inside it, she dropped every screenshot. Then a second folder, board meeting contradictions. She opened the church's old emailed minutes and began matching each claim Candace had made with what her digital trail now contradicted. She'd been asked to trust her daughter's heart. She had, for years. But the heart was deceitful, and Joanne now had the statements to match the rhythm. As she reached for her planner, her phone buzzed again. Marla's voice memo this time. "Hey, forgot to mention, the new version of the app might actually pull in archived activity too. It's been glitchy, but who knows? Worth a look." Joanne didn't press play again. She didn't need to. She stared at the last Venmo entry. Saturday night, $150. For the vibe. From the same woman who said she had no extra funds to help cover hospitality supplies. Joanne clicked Download Full Transaction History, then opened her printer tray. Cliffhanger. As the pages began spooling out, one line caught her breath mid-throat. Another payment to Janine Hope labeled Pre-Board Prep. The note on the final Venmo line, Pre-Board Prep, burned longer in Joanne's chest than anything that had come before it. Janine. Her Janine. The one she'd driven to urgent care at 2 a.m., the one who used to call Joanne my other sister in Christ. And now Candace was paying her? Not even as a friend. As a client. Joanne blinked hard at the screen, but the words didn't change. The betrayal wasn't loud or theatrical. It was polite, curated. A betrayal wrapped in soft emojis and Sunday smiles. The kettle hissed behind her. Joanne didn't hear it. Her eyes stayed locked on the printed line, her mouth slightly open. Slowly, she lowered herself into the kitchen chair and reached for her planner with a numb hand. Her pen hovered above the paper. Janine Hope, payment received, Candace, pre-board prep. Underneath she wrote, Wednesday night. Janine hugged me and said, "Some seasons are just hard." The hypocrisy wasn't shocking anymore. It was boring, predictable, but the revisionist history, that was what hollowed Joanne out. She flipped back to an earlier note dated 6 months ago. A prayer request. Candace looking into leadership track, asking God to keep her heart humble. She nearly laughed, but the sound came out broken, like a cough. She closed the planner and stood, her shoulders trembling with something heavier than sadness. Then she opened a drawer near the fridge, pulled out a pale manila envelope, and slipped in 3 screenshots. One from the Vegas spiritual retreat, one of the brunches, and now this last one, Janine's name, plain as day. She tucked the envelope into her tote bag. By late afternoon, Joanne found herself in front of a red brick house with mismatched flower pots lining the porch. Linda's. Linda had served on the elder board longer than anyone else, quiet, fair, and rarely rattled. When Joanne called earlier and said, "Can I come by for tea?" Linda's answer was simple. Of course. Inside, Linda poured chamomile into wide ceramic mugs, the kitchen smelling faintly of lemon and sage. Joanne didn't sip. She placed the envelope on the table like a legal notice. "I need to ask you something," she said softly. Linda gave a small, cautious nod. Joanne slid the envelope forward and watched her open it, watched her scan, watched her still. The silence hung as Linda slowly reached for her glasses, set them on her nose, and read everything again, this time slower. Joanne spoke only once. "Do I seem dramatic to you?" The words came out measured, not bitter, not broken, just curious. Linda looked up, her brow tight. "Joanne, I don't know what this is, but it's not drama, it's careful." Joanne exhaled. She used to text me when she overdrew her account, when her car wouldn't start, when she needed help moving. I've Venmo'd her more times than I can count. Now she goes on Instagram and posts things like, "Boundaries are holy. Not everyone deserves your story." Linda winced. "I'm apparently a chapter she had to outgrow," Joanne added with a tight smile. "She said that on a podcast." Linda picked up one of the screenshots again, this one labeled Spiritual Realignment, $225, with a timestamp 2 hours before the last board meeting. Joanne leaned forward, eyes calm now. "I'm not trying to embarrass her, Linda. I'm trying to stop rewriting my life while I'm still alive to remember it." The room was silent except for the faint clink of a spoon against ceramic. Finally, Linda set down the envelope, folded her hands, and said the words Joanne hadn't let herself hope for. "Maybe it's time the rest of them see this." Joanne didn't nod. She didn't smile. But her hand moved to the tote again, where another set of printouts waited in identical folders. As she zipped the bag closed, her phone buzzed. Candace had just posted a story. "When God elevates you, expect resistance, even from your own blood." Joanne read the story twice, her thumb hovering over the phone like it might catch fire. Resistance from your own blood. As if betrayal were simply holy friction, as if erasure was part of the anointing. The caption pulsed with sanctimony, but it wasn't the words that made Joanne's chest tighten. It was the tag beneath them, at Faith Forward Living, the coaching page, the same coaching business Candace had always described as just a side thing, a little something to help people walk in alignment with their calling. Joanne's thumb stilled, then tapped. The page opened to a curated grid, moody pastel quotes, filtered selfies, client testimonials in cursive fonts. But something about the tagline stopped her cold. Faith Forward Living, Spirit-Led Coaching for Women of Vision. Beneath it, a payment link. It routed to Venmo, but not the account she'd seen before. This one was under a different username, at FF Candace Lead. She clicked it. What opened wasn't just surprising, it was surgical, clinical, payments, dozens of them, from names she recognized, women she'd prayed with, carpooled with, carried crockpots beside. Every one of them had at one point come to her about Candace's spiritual gifts. The emojis here were different, less brunch, more branding, alignment check there from Shelby M. Detox Coaching, from Janine, soul tie cutting, Zoom, from the youth pastor's wife, deposit, speaking prep, from the same board liaison who had told Joanne just last week that Candace is really growing into her calling. Joanne sat back in her chair. The quiet was almost mocking. Outside, the wind chattered dry leaves against the windows like faint applause. She opened her laptop, went back to the account, and clicked Download Statement. It asked, "Export PDF with payment descriptions?" Yes. She printed 3 months' worth, then another 3. She watched the pages glide out of the printer tray, each line another weight falling into her lap. When the final page printed, she slid the stack into a clear binder and flipped through it like scripture. It wasn't the money, it was the misrepresentation, the hypocrisy. Candace had spent weeks telling the board that Joanne alienated women through harshness, that she was making people feel excluded. And yet here were those same women paying her daughter to coach them, behind paywalls and pastel filters. Joanne's fingers twitched toward her notebook. Monday, 2:03 p.m. Found at FF Sanday's lead notable transactions. Janine, breakthrough call, $180. Erica M., faith detox intro, $75. Shelby M., coaching series, $540. Then, underlined 3 times, all paid by women who told me Candace was just helping out. She picked up her phone. Not to text, not to post, just to photograph the Venmo screen and the binder in the same frame. It would be enough. By dinner, she had created a folder on her desktop titled FFC Evidence Inside. Screenshots, PDFs, the public coaching page, archived stories, booked calls through Calendly. Candace hadn't buried her secrets. She'd branded them. Joanne plugged in the small navy USB she kept in her stationery drawer, the one she used for church documents. She labeled a new folder, Board Coaching Material. She dragged the files inside, her jaw set. Then she slipped the USB into a small black case, clicked it closed, and slid it into her purse beside her keys. Later that night, she took a gold Sharpie and wrote on the outside of the case in neat all-caps script, "For the board." She zipped her bag closed just as her phone buzzed. A calendar notification. Women's Ministry Quarterly Board Review, Thursday, 5 p.m. Candace would be presenting her new vision plan at that very meeting. The USB pressed against the lining of Joanne's purse like a heartbeat. As she waited outside the church conference room, her fingers drummed quietly along the leather strap. Each click of her nail felt like a countdown. She hadn't dressed to intimidate, just pressed slacks, a pearl button-down, and her wedding ring still glinting quietly from habit, not allegiance. But when the door opened and she stepped inside, carrying nothing but a folder and the truth, the room seemed to inhale. 3 board members sat at the long table, Harriet, Ed, and Claire, each older than Candace, and each, Joanne hoped, old enough to remember integrity before it became inconvenient. "Thanks for making time," she said, setting the folder down. Claire offered a polite nod. "We understand you had materials." Joanne opened the folder with measured calm and slid the USB across the table. "Everything on here is publicly accessible. I didn't snoop, I didn't hack, I screenshotted and documented what Candace shared, voluntarily and repeatedly." Harriet adjusted her glasses and leaned in. "This is about her coaching?" "And the payments," Joanne said, "the second Venmo account, the use of church relationships to funnel business, and the false narrative she's been building about me and others." Ed hesitated, his voice low. "Joanne, you've served this community for years. You know how delicate things get when family and leadership overlap." She met his eyes. "That's exactly why this matters. I'm not asking for her to be removed. I'm asking for accountability, for the board to acknowledge what's happening before it does real damage, to all of us." Claire frowned. "You're saying church members paid for unlicensed coaching sessions, thinking it was ministry?" "I'm saying," Joanne said carefully, "that she used the church's trust to build a brand, and now she's using her position and my silence as a shield." Harriet plugged in the USB to the wall monitor. The screen lit up. Candace's smiling face, cropped from a profile picture. Then, a list of client transactions labeled Soul Alignment, Dating Detox, Leadership Anointing. Each name beneath them familiar. Each payment time-stamped, verified, real. Ed leaned back slowly, his jaw set. "Have you spoken to Pastor Eli?" Claire asked. "He asked me to extend grace," Joanne replied, her voice calm but unyielding. but grace without accountability isn't spiritual. It's just silence. Harriet looked at the screen again. This is a lot. And that's just the last quarter, Joanne said. But this isn't about volume. It's about truth. You all asked why I've seemed distant. Why I stepped back. I didn't. I was pushed, rewritten in real time while my daughter leveraged influence she never earned. The room was quiet for a beat too long, then Ed exhaled. We'll review this with the full board, he said. Privately, with discretion. Joanne nodded. Of course, but I'm telling you this now, before things go public or worse, before someone else gets blamed for calling it what it is. She stood, gathering her empty folder. Claire asked softly, Joanne, are you sure? Joanne paused at the door. They said I was exaggerating, but these are her receipts, her coaching packages, her words. She didn't say thank you, she didn't have to. The silence behind her said enough. By the time she got home, the house felt 10 degrees colder. She tossed her keys on the entryway table, pulled off her shoes, and made herself a cup of tea without turning on the lights. The glow of her phone cut through the kitchen's dusk. Instagram. Candace Faith Coach just posted a story. Joanne opened it, a soft-lit selfie, Candace's Bible open on her lap, captioned, When the devil can't stop your purpose, he'll use your own mother to try. Joanne stared at the screen, her teacup cooling in her hands, and whispered, Then it's time the church met the devil's receipts. Joanne stared at her daughter's Instagram story, Bible open, lighting curated, caption dripping with righteousness, When the devil can't stop your purpose, he'll use your own mother to try. The tea in her hands had gone cold, but her mind had never felt sharper. Candace hadn't just posted that for attention. She'd weaponized scripture to frame herself as the persecuted, the chosen under fire, and Joanne as the spiritual enemy. Fine. Joanne closed the app, rinsed her cup, and went to her laptop. If Candace was going to drape herself in sanctity while monetizing manipulation, then it was time to peel back the layers. Not as a mother, but as someone who understood systems, rules, and paper trails. She typed the words slowly into the search bar, Faith Forward Living plus Coaching plus Candace, last name. The first result was a sleek website with soft pastels and gold fonts. Align your spirit, unlock your purpose, break generational cycles with faith. Joanne's stomach tightened. There Candace was again, smiling in professional headshots, eyes bright, arms folded like a CEO of enlightenment. What jolted Joanne wasn't the branding. It was the testimonials, 4 quotes, each one ended with a reference to their home church. Even mentioned Pastor Eli by name. Another used the official women's ministry logo in the footer. Joanne took a screenshot, then another. She scrolled to the bottom. Sessions start at $97. Full alignment package, $420 a month. Her daughter had taken prayer requests, layered them with therapy language, slapped a price tag on faith, and marketed it from the church's pulpit to her client funnel. Joanne exhaled slowly and pulled out her phone. Her friend Darlene, retired from ministry but still active in church compliance consulting, answered on the third ring. "Joe?" she asked, surprise evident. "I need a favor," Joanne said, her voice steady but charged. "I'm looking at a coaching site. My daughter's. She's using our church's name in her testimonials. She's also quoting prices." A pause. Then, "That's a problem." "I know. Send me everything. I'll run it through my nonprofit checklist. If she's monetizing under implied tax-exempt cover, that's grounds for a formal audit, not just for her. For the church, too." Joanne didn't hesitate. She forwarded the screenshots, the URL, the pricing tiers. As she waited, she clicked over to the site's privacy policy. Buried in the legal language was the name of an LLC, one she didn't recognize. She copied it into a new tab. Faith Forward Living, LLC, registered agent, Candace, last name filed 6 months ago, right around the time Joanne was being quietly nudged off the board planning slate. Her jaw clenched. She opened her notes app and began documenting. Faith Forward Living, LLC discovered 6 months ago. Website launched post-Joanne board removal. Client list overlaps with church group roster. Pricing structure mimics tithe psychology. Give and you'll receive. The irony landed hard. Joanne hadn't lost her influence. It had been repackaged, sold, rebranded in candles and hashtags. Candace had taken the community her mother helped build, funneled it through a filter, and turned it into income. Her phone buzzed. Text from Darlene. Joanne. I'm looking at this now. If she's charging and branding under the church name, they're exposed too. You're not just dealing with coaching ethics anymore. This is IRS territory. Joanne leaned back in her chair, staring at the text. So it wasn't just her name Candace had leveraged. It was the whole church's shield, the reputation of a nonprofit, the safety net of faith, bent quietly into a business plan. And now, the board that had once questioned her emotional state, they were sitting on a legal liability, wrapped in pastel branding and PayPal buttons. Joanne saved the message, added it to her folder, and opened her email. Subject line: Church Board. Legal concern. Time sensitive. She began drafting her next move. As she clicked Attach File, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Darlene. You're going to want to see what she put on the donation page. Joanne's hand was still resting on her mouse when her phone buzzed again. You're going to want to see what she put on the donation page. She clicked quickly. The link opened to a fundraiser titled Seed Faith for the Future. Help Candace build her platform. The goal? $15,000. The description? To expand my spiritual coaching into new formats for outreach, podcast studio, filming equipment, and guest speaker honorariums. Her name was in the fine print. Built from a legacy of faith under my mother's covering. Covering, not consent. Joanne didn't sleep much that night. She highlighted phrases, took screenshots, checked donation totals. She saw names she recognized: Carol, Beth, even Pastor Eli's assistant, Lydia. By morning, her inbox held a new message. Subject: Coffee from Pastor Eli. The cafe was just off the church parking lot. Neutral ground, but only technically. Pastor Eli wore his usual navy quarter zip, smile kind, eyes calculating. He stirred honey into his tea with precise, unhurried movements. Joanne let him speak first. I know this season's been difficult, Sister Joanne. Transitions in leadership can stir up a lot of emotion. Her silence invited him to continue. We want to make space for healing, he said gently. Not headlines. Joanne blinked once. Headlines? I only mean some conversations are better had with grace. Privately? With patience? He leaned in slightly, voice dropping. Candace is under attack. Spiritually, she's trying to serve, and the enemy uses division. Joanne sipped her coffee. Bitter. I didn't realize questions were divisive. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course not. I'm just asking you to be discreet, for everyone's sake. Joanne nodded, slowly, thoughtfully. Of course. But inside, something locked into place. She remembered the first time she met Pastor Eli. Candace had introduced them after a service 6 years ago, practically glowing. He really sees me, Mom. Like, my purpose. Joanne had trusted that, had even defended his sermons when others called them soft on substance. Now, watching him stir, his tea again like it was a ritual, Joanne felt it. Not spiritual attack, institutional containment. This wasn't pastoral care, it was PR. That evening, she logged back into Facebook, still wired from the coffee she hadn't wanted to finish. Notifications pinged. Lydia had tagged Pastor Eli in a post. Curious, she clicked. A GoFundMe link. Identical to the one Darlene had sent. Only this time, it was embedded in a glossy promo graphic. Faith Forward Living presents, help launch the next phase of purpose. Above the link, Pastor Eli's smiling face, mid-sermon. He'd shared it to his own story, too. Joanne scrolled through the post's comments, emojis, prayers, encouragement. And beneath it all, buried under the likes and hallelujahs, one quiet share button. She clicked it, paused, then copied the link into her documentation folder. She opened a new note. Date: Thursday, Pastor Eli coffee conversation, asked for discretion. Same evening, Pastor Eli tagged in Candace's fundraiser. Beneath it, she typed, "This isn't about peace, it's about proximity to power." She closed her laptop and sat for a long while in the dark. The house was still. Her coffee cup, untouched since noon, sat cold beside her keyboard. She wasn't angry. Not yet. But she was awake. She reopened her inbox and stared at her drafted board email, cursor blinking over the words, "I request a special meeting." Her finger hovered, then clicked send. The moment she clicked send, Joanne's chest tightened. Not from regret, but from readiness. It felt like flipping the last card in a game she hadn't agreed to play, but knew how to win. She closed her laptop gently, almost ceremoniously, and stood by the window. Outside, the church parking lot across the street still buzzed with life. Kids laughing, someone slamming a trunk, and the distant murmur of praise music spilling from the open rec hall doors. She had always believed in quiet stewardship, in honoring the process, in believing people would come around if you gave them time. But time hadn't protected her. Time had given Candace space to build an empire on misdirection, and worse, on Joanne's name. She turned back to her desk, opened her email again, and clicked on the link to the Faith Forward Living fundraiser one more time. The page had changed. What was once a simple donation goal had ballooned overnight. Now it read, "God is expanding the territory. Help Candace produce faith-centered content for hurting women, video devotions, community coaching calls, and more." Joanne's eyes narrowed. There, under payout details, beneficiary, Candace B., personal. No sign of her LLC, no nonprofit ID, no church affiliation. She copied the page into a PDF, took a screenshot for redundancy, then clicked Donor List. Names populated in a slow scroll: Patrice B., Carol L., board member, Lydia C., even Darlene. It was like watching a trust fall in reverse. They'd all leaned toward Candace and away from her, without even asking why. And the amount? Already $8,342. Joanne reached for her notebook. She flipped past the prayer circle transcript, the Venmo screenshots, and the Faith Forward invoice receipts. Then she began a new list. Faith fundraiser irregularities. Personal payout, no EIN. Church staff donors, undisclosed in meeting minutes. Video project goals, vague, no accountability. Shared by Pastor Eli, violation of neutrality. Joanne printed everything: fundraiser homepage, donor list, the payout verification, and Candace's latest update to supporters, which read, "God's doing a new thing. Those who resist it often resemble yesterday's gatekeepers, but we march on." Gatekeepers, a word designed to sting. Her phone vibrated, a message from Linda. "Did you see Eli shared her page again?" Joanne didn't reply. She was already writing "special meeting" in bold marker across the front of a manila folder. She thought about every bake sale she'd organized to help raise money for women's shelters, every monthly pantry drive she'd run out of her own garage. She remembered when Candace was 12 and cried because Joanne made her skip a sleepover to help hand out blankets with the outreach team. "This is what real service looks like," she'd told her. "It doesn't always sparkle." Now her daughter was selling it in filters and hashtags. That night, Joanne sat in bed with her back straight against the headboard, glasses low on her nose, pages spread across her lap. She played Candace's fundraiser video again, watched her daughter speak in glowing ring light about reclaiming generational power. "I'm creating spaces for women who have been silenced by shame," Candace said, blinking slow and sad at the camera. Joanne closed her eyes. She wasn't angry at the language. She was angry at the performance, the way her daughter weaponized every phrase Joanne had once used in prayer or pain and turned it into marketing. A knock came from her phone, a new notification. Someone had commented under Candace's post, "So proud. To support this. The church has always needed more voices like yours." Joanne stared at the screen. Voices like yours. She muted the sound, closed the app, and opened her files instead. Her breath was steady, her fingers deliberate. She placed every printout, every screenshot, every detail into the manila folder, one page at a time. It wasn't revenge, it was preservation. She wasn't burning a bridge, she was boarding up a door. Because this wasn't about Candace anymore, this was about the institution that rewarded her for lying. Joanne sealed the envelope, wrote "for board review only" in ink, and slid in the final page, the fundraiser's PayPal payout notice. As she tucked the folder into her tote bag, her gaze caught the bottom corner of the fundraiser printout. A donor comment had just posted, "Glad to see the next generation taking the mic? We've heard enough from theirs." Joanne stared at the words for a long moment, then closed the bag. She was bringing it all to the board, and this time, she wasn't coming quietly. The printer spat out the final page as the sun began to rise. Joanne smoothed the warm paper, slipped it into the growing stack of evidence, and slid it all into the same manila envelope she'd labeled in black ink the night before, "Special Meeting." She sealed it with care, like a wound, and laid it beside her Navy USB drive on the dining room table, one for the board, one for the record. Her coffee had gone cold, but her resolve was scalding. No more whispering, no more waiting. She dressed with deliberation, chose a soft gray blouse, neutral, unthreatening, something no one could accuse of being dramatic. Her tote bag clicked shut with finality. She didn't check her phone. She didn't need confirmation. She had the facts. Now it was time to deliver them. The church conference room was smaller than it used to feel. 7 chairs formed a crooked semicircle, a folding table placed awkwardly in the middle. It smelled of whiteboard markers and spearmint gum. Joanne walked in first, as she'd planned, and set the manila envelope at the center of the table. The USB she kept in her hand. Sharon, the board president, was the next to arrive. Then Lydia, Patrice, 2 others, all quiet, guarded, not quite making eye contact. "You requested this session," Sharon said gently. "You've got the floor." Joanne nodded once. No pleasantries, no preamble. She unsealed the envelope and laid the documents down one by one, like a dealer turning over cards no one had expected. First, Venmo screenshots with timestamps and notes, highlighted and printed in color. Second, the fundraiser payment trail, payout directed to Candace's personal account, despite public language implying ministry use. Third, Candace's coaching testimonials, featuring quotes from church members and the church's name, without permission. Fourth, a notarized clause from the LLC filing Candace had likely skimmed over, which made her use of nonprofit language a liability for the church. "I'm not here to accuse anyone," Joanne said calmly. "I'm here to present what's already public, what's already documented, and what's already been misrepresented, under this roof." The room stayed quiet. Lydia's arms folded. Patrice blinked too much. Sharon leaned in slightly but said nothing. Joanne continued, voice even. "This isn't about estrangement. This is about stewardship, about trust, about what it means to carry the church's name and reputation without hijacking it for personal gain." Just then, the door opened. Candace walked in wearing a camel-colored blazer and a false expression of surprise, a caramel macchiato in hand. Her eyes flicked across the room, landing on the pile of documents and then on Joanne. "Oh, wasn't aware of a meeting this morning," she said lightly. Sharon gestured to the open seat. "You're welcome to join. We're reviewing some financial concerns." Candace hesitated, then sat, slowly. She glanced at the printouts, nose twitching but said nothing. Joanne waited, then reached into her bag one last time and pulled out the USB, navy blue, labeled with masking tape in her own steady handwriting. She held it up between 2 fingers, letting its weight be seen before she set it gently on the table. "This contains everything you've just seen, plus audio clips from board meetings, screen recordings of Candace's site before edits, and metadata from the fundraiser page before the payout was obscured." Candace's face went flat. Her hands stopped moving. The cup of coffee on the table trembled slightly as she set it down. Sharon sat back. "This is serious." "It is," Joanne replied. "That's why it's here, and not hidden." Candace tried to laugh, too sharp. "Is this really necessary? Over a few receipts and petty drama?" Joanne didn't flinch. "You weaponized my silence. I chose to weaponize transparency." Patrice shifted. Lydia finally spoke. "What happens next?" Joanne didn't answer immediately. She reached out, slid the USB forward, centered it. "This isn't about family," she said, meeting no one's eyes and all of them at once. It's about truth. The USB sat in the center of the table like a detonator, silent, harmless, and seconds from turning the room to ash. No one moved at first. Joanne's words still echoed in the wood-paneled conference room. This isn't about family. It's about truth. The kind of truth you can't pray away. The kind printed in 11-point Arial and time-stamped at 2:14 a.m. the night before. Candace blinked slowly, as if rewinding everything she'd just heard and hoping it would sound different the second time around. "This is all personal," she said finally, her voice still coated in that familiar brand of hurt-turned weapon. "She's twisting everything to make me look bad. This is retaliation, not righteousness." She leaned forward like she had more to say, but the energy in the room shifted before she could inhale. Pastor Eli, who had been unusually still until now, rubbed his temple and shifted in his seat. His silence had spoken volumes so far, but the tension in his jaw gave him away. He was calculating the cost. It was Lydia, quiet, exacting Lydia, who broke the pause. She tapped her phone a few times, then turned it toward the table. The screen lit up with Candace's fundraiser page. She read aloud, eyes unmoving. "Help me launch a luxury faith-forward podcast studio so women can receive spiritual content that meets them where they are, in style." She scrolled. Studio upgrades, equipment, and creative travel retreats included. She looked up. "You told us this was for outreach." Candace opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I mean, yes, but those are tools for outreach. If you want to reach the world, you need the right platform." Sharon raised a brow. "With luxury furniture and creative retreats?" Candace's cheeks flushed, but she stayed upright. "The message matters more than the medium." Joanne didn't need to speak again. Her silence was now amplified by the documents spread across the table, the USB beside them like punctuation. Nothing about this was emotional. It was administrative. Eli finally exhaled through his nose. "Candace, did you list this fundraiser under the church's umbrella?" "I never said it was officially through the church," she said too quickly. "I said it was inspired by church ministry." Mitchell, the board treasurer, who hadn't spoken the entire meeting, cleared his throat. "Then why did the testimonials use our church's name and quote members directly?" Candace's facade cracked. "Just a sliver. I didn't think anyone would care. It's not like I made money off it." Joanne spoke then, her voice cool and surgical. "You listed $500 in consulting income from that same link. You filed it through your LLC, not a nonprofit. You didn't declare the donor funds as ministry expenses. That's not creative marketing. That's misrepresentation." No one flinched this time. Eli looked around the table. "Do we need a vote?" Sharon nodded. "Motion to suspend Candace from all church leadership roles pending formal review and counsel by the Ethics Subcommittee." "Seconded," said Mitchell. Lydia raised her hand. "In favor." The motion passed in under 30 seconds. Candace stood, knocking her chair slightly backward. The sound echoed in the space like a slammed piano lid. "You're all just afraid of what I represent," she hissed. "Women with influence, women with options." Joanne didn't move. "Women with options," she said calmly, "know the difference between truth and branding." Candace grabbed her phone, swiped her coffee cup off the table, and stormed out, leaving the faint scent of cinnamon and resentment in her wake. The room didn't relax. It simply settled. Joanne reached forward, collected the USB, and placed it gently back into her tote. No dramatics, just process. Pastor Eli, still seated, said quietly, "I think we all need to prepare for what comes next." Joanne didn't look up as she zipped her bag. "So do I," she said. Joanne didn't look up as she zipped her tote bag. "So do I," she had told Pastor Eli. She hadn't meant it as a threat, just a forecast. And the weather came fast. By the time she pulled out of the church parking lot, the sky above was the kind of crisp gray that made everything feel charged, like the day was holding its breath. At a red light, her phone pinged twice, then again, then 7 more times in rapid succession. By the time she parked at home, her screen had bloomed into chaos, unread messages, blinking notifications, 2 missed calls from an unknown number, and a voicemail from Lydia that began with the words, "Brace yourself." Joanne sat in her car for a moment longer than she needed to. The engine idled as the world she knew reshaped itself in real time. Inside the house, she set her bag on the foyer bench and opened the group text thread titled Prayer Warriors 2007. It was burning. First message, "Did you see what happened at the board meeting?" Then, "She made it all up? What the heck? Wait, is that fundraiser real? Who's gonna tell the pastor's wife?" A screenshot of Candace's fundraiser circulated next, followed by reactions stacked like kindling. Shock emojis, hearts, and one solemn thumbs down from Janine. Within an hour, Candace's Faith Forward Living Instagram page had gone private. Her Facebook coaching group, Soul Steps with Candace, was wiped. Her Venmo username, gone. The silence was not graceful. It was a scramble. Joanne walked to her desk and opened her laptop. The flood wasn't contained to private texts anymore. One of Candace's clients had posted on the women's community page, "I feel so stupid. I paid her $250 for a spiritual detox package she said would include church-approved guidance. I want a refund." Replies rolled in. "She told me the church would cover my second session. Is that where my donation went?" Joanne didn't type anything. She simply watched. Every post was an echo of something she'd tried to ignore over the last few months. Dismissed. Downplayed. Now, it was all falling under the weight of its own design. A DM popped up from someone she didn't know, username KimmyMorgan72. "Hi, you don't know me. I stopped going to church last spring. Candace made me feel small, like I wasn't faithful enough. I believed her when she said you were controlling. I see now that wasn't true. I'm sorry." Joanne closed the message, her throat tight. Not from vindication, from the sudden knowing there had been more women, more silences. Another message followed. Then another. "I should have said something sooner. Thank you for standing up. We needed that more than you know. I thought I was the only one." She heard the ping of a new email and opened it. Subject, Pro Bono Support. Potential Misrepresentation Claim Sender, Hannah Dobs, J.D., Civil Nonprofit Compliance Network. Ms. Watson, I was forwarded documentation regarding Faith Forward Living. If you are interested in filing a formal complaint for nonprofit fraud or donor misrepresentation, I can offer guidance. Please let me know how you wish to proceed. Joanne leaned back in her chair, fingers still resting on the mouse. This wasn't over. She clicked reply, typed 2 words, "Let's talk," then hit send. Joanne's email had barely cooled in her sent folder before her phone rang. "Ms. Watson, this is Hannah Dobbs. You wrote, 'Let's talk,' so let's." Joanne stepped into the living room, away from the open windows where the neighborhood kids played basketball. Her voice dropped to match the new temperature in the air, cold, precise. Within 10 minutes, the lawyer had explained the next steps: documentation, timelines, filing language. And then, with a kind of reluctant curiosity, she added, "I've seen a lot of spiritual grifts before, but the hybrid of pastoral identity and transactional coaching? That's new. And risky." Joanne stared at her own reflection in the TV screen. Static. Silent. Just listening. She tied her coaching claims to a tax-exempt entity she wasn't authorized to use. Hannah said, "That gives us teeth." By the end of the call, Joanne had forwarded over a zipped folder of PDFs, screenshots, and saved emails labeled Candace, Phase 2. And with it, a copy of the original donation drive outline Candace had piggybacked from 2 retreats ago, still with Joanne's name at the top. She didn't just profit, Joanne said, she plagiarized. Hannah laughed. That'll preach. The formal complaint went out the next morning, addressed to the Regional Department of Charitable Integrity and Oversight. It cited 3 violations: unauthorized use of nonprofit branding in personal coaching sales, soliciting donations under false pretenses via unregistered platforms, operating as a church-affiliated service without documented oversight or approval. Attached were Candace's fundraising page, exports, PayPal receipts, Venmo summaries, and marketing materials, all with screenshots of church-linked testimonials, many still bearing the cross and dove logo Joanne had helped design back in 2010. For the first time in weeks, Joanne didn't refresh her inbox after hitting send. She shut her laptop, made herself a bowl of lentil soup, and turned on a nature documentary. She wanted to watch something that didn't speak back, but 3 days later, Candace's name did appear again, this time in a public record alert. Mitchell, her lawyer, called mid-afternoon. "Well," he said, "we just got confirmation." The state flagged the LLC. Joanne blinked. What does that mean? It means her little empire is no longer operating in the gray. It's officially under review. The IRS has been notified of possible misreporting, and her Venmo business transactions have been subpoenaed. The words sank slowly, like pebbles in still water. Joanne walked to the kitchen window, set her tea on the sill, and stared at the garden beds she hadn't touched in weeks. Something about it, dry soil, half-blossomed lily, felt like a metaphor she wasn't ready to finish yet. "She's going to say I ruined her," she said, mostly to herself. Mitchell's voice softened. "Then let her. But at least she won't profit from it." By the following Monday, the fallout began. Candace's coaching platform displayed a 404 error, her old Faith Forward Living blog redirected to a blank page with one line, "Under maintenance. Pray for us." Church members whispered, but the tone had shifted. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was recognition. At noon, an all-church email went out. Simple, clinical, and with no signature. Effective immediately, Faith Forward Living and all associated services have been disaffiliated from all church-endorsed activities, groups, and platforms. Members with questions should contact the board secretary. Joanne read it once, then again. She didn't smile. She didn't feel like gloating. Instead, she scrolled to the list of contacts she'd compiled weeks ago, the ones who had apologized, the ones who had gone silent. And one by one, she forwarded the statement with no extra message, no emojis, no subject line. She simply sent truth. That evening, she opened her journal, the one she hadn't touched since her name was erased from the retreat committee. She titled a fresh page, "Reparations, Not Revenge." And then she wrote, "They called it drama, but it was design. They called it gossip, but it was governance. They called it mothering, but it was protection." The final line came slow, but steady. "I didn't raise her to do this, but I raised myself to respond." A new email appeared in her inbox. Subject line, "Podcast collaboration request. Your perspective matters." Joanne stared at it, and this time, she smiled. She let the cursor hover over it, her fingers still, remembering how quickly Candace used to jump at moments like this, grabbing headlines, lacing her Instagram posts with half scripture and half sale pitches. But now? Joanne clicked open the email and then minimized it just as fast. She wasn't ready to decide if she'd speak. Instead, she opened her Facebook, not to post, just to scroll. Candace's account was gone, not deactivated, deleted. No more pastel graphics with "God is within her, she will not fall." No link in bio. No tagged Bible verses on beach selfies or photos of smoothie bowls with captions like #FaithFuel. Vanished, and with it, her circle. One by one, the younger women from the prayer circles unfollowed Candace. Joanne noticed it not through pettiness, but pattern. People who once left hearts under Candace's every update now shared other devotionals, different voices. A few posted subtle apologies. One even DM'd her, "I'm sorry I believed everything she said. I didn't know who to trust back then." Candace never responded to the board's suspension, never appealed. She just disappeared. The silence wasn't announced. It just arrived like the flu. Quiet, contagious, and inevitable. At the next Tuesday meeting, Joanne was already in the kitchen stirring tea when Sharon walked over and gently tapped her on the shoulder. "We're revising the women's retreat slate," Sharon said, her tone neutral. "You're back on logistics if you're willing. No fanfare, no public apology, just reinstatement, quiet, respectful, but absolute." Joanne didn't smile, but she nodded once. Glad to help. And that was it. Pastor Eli never addressed the suspension from the pulpit. Not once. not even in passing, but his voice faltered ever so slightly during one Sunday benediction, right around the line about false prophets. And the congregation, at least the ones who had followed the fallout, sat a little straighter. In the following weeks, Joanne's days felt strangely quieter. No drama, no crisis, no sudden texts with passive-aggressive scripture. Her planner filled with real tasks again, grocery lists for the fall food drive, RSVP counts for the seniors' luncheon. But at night, the ache of it sometimes came back. Not anger, just mourning. She missed the girl who used to braid her hair before church, the teenager who called her from campus crying after a breakup, asking if she could come home for a few days, even the adult daughter who once left sticky notes on her fridge that said, "You're the strongest woman I know." She didn't know where that girl had gone, maybe into the algorithm, maybe into ambition. One morning she passed the community board in the fellowship hall, flyers for car washes, tutoring, and a Bible study led by one of the newer members. Someone had pinned a torn page from a devotional book near the top. The verse wasn't labeled, just a quote, scribbled in black ink, "Let your yes be yes, and your no be no." Joanne stared at it for a moment, then reached into her tote and tacked up a note of her own beneath it. Not scripture. Just one sentence. Discernment is not disobedience. She stepped back, took in the message board. The hallway. The hush of a sanctuary that had once echoed with drama, and now felt like it could breathe again. That night, back at home, she reopened the podcast email. Read it again. "We'd love to hear your perspective. You don't have to name names. Just help us understand what happens when image is used to silence truth, and how one woman pushed back with receipts instead of rage." Her finger hovered over the reply button. She clicked, typed 2 words. "I'm listening." Joanne didn't respond to the podcast email right away. She sat with it. Let it sit with her. 4 words kept blinking on the screen like a dare. "Would you tell your side?" She closed the laptop and stared at the quiet house around her. Hardwood floors buffed clean. The silence held. Not cold, not sharp like it had once been, but thick with meaning. She'd once feared the emptiness. Now, it was where her voice finally echoed back. So she replied with one line, "Let me start with what I read aloud." It had been 6 days since the vote. 6 days since the disaffiliation announcement. The church newsletter hadn't mentioned Candace's name, but no one missed the thunder beneath the silence. Her social accounts were gone. The Instagram stories with perfectly filtered coffee cups and devotional captions vanished like smoke. Her client links dead, her faith-forward journey rerouted, offline. But the room today, the annual member review, was packed. Plastic name tags clung awkwardly to church cardigans and denim jackets. The usual air of formality was gone, replaced by a low, watchful murmur. Everyone knew what this was. It wasn't a ceremony, it was a reckoning. Joanne didn't wear a suit. She wore slate gray slacks, a navy blouse, and a simple cross pendant, an anniversary gift from her late husband. Not polished, not theatrical, just clear. Sharon tapped the mic twice. "We'd like to open the floor to member testimony. Joanne Carter has asked to speak." Joanne walked up with a folded paper and a calm breath. The wooden podium creaked slightly beneath her hand. She didn't fumble. She didn't thank anyone. She began with steel. "I stood quietly when she lied. And then I showed the truth. The hush in the room wasn't reverent. It was tight, braced. I've served this church for over 14 years. You know me. You know what I've built, what I've carried. Some of you held my hand at the hospital. Some of you shared a pew with me the morning after my husband passed." Her voice didn't waver, but her breath deepened. Her next words landed like gravel laid gently over a casket. "What I didn't do was turn that trust into income. I didn't call your pain a coaching opportunity." She unfolded the paper slowly. But someone else did. She lifted the first Venmo transaction, projected on the screen beside her. From it, Gospel Glow Up, $300. Caption, "Dating Detox, Jesus First, Always." Paid by our own deacon's wife, the same woman Candace said I'd alienated from the board. A ripple through the rows. Second transaction, $75. Caption, "Boundaries Session." Paid by our nursery lead. The same week Candace said she couldn't afford to help with the youth retreat, Joanne paused, not for effect, for breath. Then came the third. 150. Caption: Emergency Uber and wine, ugh, men. Paid the night she told me she was too emotionally drained to visit her spiritual mentor. That mentor was me. She folded the papers carefully, slid them into her folder. I was called possessive, controlling, dramatic. She looked up, eyes cutting clean through the second row. But you don't have to control people when you have facts. And drama doesn't hold up in board reviews. She stepped back just slightly. So no, I didn't speak for revenge. I spoke to reclaim the room. Sharon opened her mouth to close the mic, but paused. The room didn't move. No one clapped, but a few nodded. A few pressed their lips together, held their hands a little tighter in their laps. And in the back, Pastor Eli stood, just for a second, then slowly sat back down. That night, Joanne returned home to an inbox of quiet echoes. One from a woman in the choir. I'm sorry. For believing the shine instead of the root. One from a scholarship girl she once mentored. You've always been my proof that faith doesn't require perfection, just integrity. Joanne placed the folded speech beside her journal, closed the book slowly, and let the room go still again. She used my silence as cover. I used her receipts as a mirror.